Welcome to Round the Table with Christian Concern. It's great to see you. If you're watching live, do say hi in the comments and chat, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, and we can respond. We're discussing a very important and significant topic today, conversion therapy, and responding to claims that are made by politicians and in the media on this subject. And joining me today, we've got an all-star cast today. Andrea Williams, Chief Executive of Christian Concern, is with us. Mike Davidson from Core Issues Trust, seasoned, experienced commentator on this subject, as well as Carys Moseley, Dr. Carys Moseley, who has written extensively and very closely follows this whole very important subject of conversion therapy. Welcome, folks. Lovely to see you. Great to engage on this important topic. And I think what we decided to do today was play you a clip. There's been a debate in Northern Ireland this week on this subject in the Northern Ireland Assembly about conversion therapy. And it's just great to play you a clip, just 3 or 4 minutes of one of the politicians there and what he said about conversion therapy. And then we'd like to take what he says apart between us. So if we can play that clip, and then we'll get straight into it after that. So this is Doug Beattie in the Northern Ireland Assembly just last week talking on this very subject.
Mr. Speaker, I've always been told that when you start a debate to say something profound, to engage everybody in the room to the debate. I don't have one. But here's what I will say. I'm a straight man. I was born straight. There is no fix or cure for me. There is no therapy that will make me a gay man. So why on earth would we say that a gay man wasn't born that way? Why would we say that a gay man can be fixed or cured? Why can we say that there's a therapy to change a gay man into a straight man? There isn't. It's ludicrous. And if you believe that gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, gender diverse is a lifestyle choice, there is nothing I can say here today to you that will change your mind. If that's what you believe, then that's what you believe. Conversion therapy is humiliating. It is harmful. And listening to those testimonies of individuals who have undergone conversion therapy, it is clear that it has far-reaching negative mental impacts. The continual promotion that somebody is broken or wrong leads them to feel they are worthless, and extremes lead to suicide. The British Psychological Society for Northern Ireland chairperson said conversion therapies are unethical and unsupported by psychological evidence. Our society is committed to ending this practice. Sexual orientation and gender identities are not mental health disorders. However, those subjected to exclusion, stigma, prejudice may well experience mental health issues as a result. She went on to say, it is important that the public are made aware of the risk and the harms of conversion therapies. The UN independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity said, actions to subject lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans or gender diverse persons to practice of conversion therapy are by their very nature degrading, inhuman and cruel, and create a significant risk of torture. A significant risk of torture. Inhumane. Cruel. I've got to say, those are words that should shake us all to the core when we think that some of our people here in Northern Ireland, our brothers and our sisters, our sons and our daughters, our teachers, our policemen, our nurses, our doctors, are subjected or could be subjected to that. It should shake us all. Yet it is happening. And it is happening here in Northern Ireland. Because we actually have a charity with charitable status and everything that goes with that charitable status, conducting conversion therapies here in Northern Ireland. They are part funded by the International Federation for Therapy and Counselling Choice. And do you know what they say? They say witnessing domestic violence or suffering sexual abuse can make you gay. My word. My word. So you're subjected to domestic violence or sexual abuse, and that can make you gay. I've got to say to everybody here, to anybody listening, this just needs to be stopped. And I'll keep saying that. Inhumane, cruel practices that is detrimental to people's mental health.
Great. Well, listen, that's something to get us stirred up, isn't it? There, and I see that somebody's commented here on YouTube. Can you give one example of a Christian torturing anyone because of sexual preference? And you know, perhaps that is the most outrageous claim that he makes here, isn't it? Which actually comes from the UN, doesn't it, Carys? That this kind of therapy is like torture. Do you want to, Carys? How would you respond to that?
Well, I actually went to the UN experts meeting on this. He'd done a report published in May last year, and a whole bunch of us who don't want conversion therapy bans and who realise what they're really about turned up and asked them questions because there was a facility for doing that. This guy, the UN expert, Victor Madrigal-Borloz, has been on UN committees on torture. That doesn't qualify him to talk about psychology, counselling and religion. So from the other side as well, we have issues. What he's done in that report, very simply, is lump together all kinds of ways of handling homosexual and cross-gender or gender-variant behaviour. So he includes things from very different countries, child protection laws, and then also punishments, because homosexual behaviour is illegal in many countries, especially Islamic countries. And he, so some of them might amount to torture. Obviously, torture goes with punishment, but that's not at all the same as religious pastoral care, speaking with people, praying with people, let alone procedures for protecting children from predators who are of the same sex as themselves, but older. And so this lumping together is what enables politicians like Doug Beattie to say outrageous things like, well, insinuating that core issues and IFTCC are engaged really in something that's on a continuum with torture.
Mike, how would you respond to this?
Well, I was reflecting actually when I was in Geneva in the United Nations chamber a few years ago when an activist raised the issue of torture and claimed that the US was in breach of its
human
rights in this issue. And it was strange because it was in the context of all that was happening in Guantanamo Bay at the moment.
Right.
And at that time. And what went through my head is, now we know that this man who claims to have been harmed by so-called conversion therapy, and yet he cannot give the name and the date or any substantial details about the therapist he met. And over again, his testimony has been refuted. So, you know, there's something very seriously wrong here in the connections that are being made. So that was what was going through my head as I listened to that speech.
Yeah. And he starts off, doesn't he, talking about, you know, I'm straight and, you know, as if people are born this way and some people are born gay and all that kind of thing, which is obviously a base assumption for him and many of these people. Mike, go on.
The issue is that name one mental health body, even those who have signed up to the Memorandum of Understanding on Conversion Therapy in the UK, that claims that we are born gay. I don't think you will find any who claim that. But here is a politician who is promoting what has become an outdated approach and understanding that even the gay activists, even in this country, are beginning to abandon, saying it's no longer necessary. You can just argue in terms of the rights of gay people. You don't need to depend on something that they know does not add up in terms of the scientific evidence. So I was embarrassed to hear that argument being made in our assembly in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Did anyone refute it? Do you know? I mean, because you're right. Gay activists are saying sexuality is fluid, it's changeable, people change, this kind of thing. They've abandoned this idea of a fixed at birth sexuality.
Well, I see this as something of a continuation of the debate that took place in Westminster Hall a few weeks before that. That was also a symbolic attempt to raise the issues. Now, it was a bit more successful in Northern Ireland than that it had been in Westminster Hall, in the sense that it was held in the debating chamber. So there was a lot more kudos, I suppose, ascribed to it. But that's the point, Tim. Where is the opposition? Where is the ability to intervene and to take people to the scientific literature and call into question some of these assumptions that are being made? This is what worries me.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, but I see there's a question here from Les Brooks on Facebook. And I think we need to get to this question because it also gets to what is conversion therapy. Because he says, it is being said, or is it being said, that conversion therapy is forced on people, or that even if they ask for it, that it shouldn't be carried out?
Yes, that is what they're saying, whether it's by consent or imposed.
But nobody is imposing. Nobody is imposing, are they? Who's imposing?
Nobody is imposing. But can I just make this point, Tim, that, we are still in danger of falling into the trap of thinking that conversion therapy, in inverted commas, is some kind of exotic therapy that a few people on the planet offer.
Yeah.
The truth is, any therapeutic approach from any modality that dares to question the normalization of homosexuality is what falls into conversion therapy. So it's wise to avoid the term. What is at stake here is therapeutic choice.
And Mike,
what is being banned?
Mike, that's what I saw that very plainly happen on Monday. It was a shift, but very plainly, from the alluding to conversion therapy as some exotic, terrible therapy that's really physically dangerous with electrodes and corrective rape, these sorts of extreme things that, of course, are outlawed in any event, to actually prayer or heavy prayer, mishandled therapeutic practice, heavy handling, this sort of language was definitely in the air on Monday in a new way. People were moving away. They were actually saying, in the kind of debate, in the external debate, in the media debate around it, people were saying, we know that there have been these terrible things that have existed, but we're more concerned now actually about anyone trying to change someone's identity within a religious setting. They should be, and this need to affirm, and that is very dangerous indeed. And just one other point that I wanted to pick up on our comments here, before Mike comes in there, but Matthew Grech said it was so hyped. Doug Beattie was, and that's again what you've got. You've got a really hyped debate with loaded emotional language, using terms, campaigning terms that are not defined, forced upon parliaments, forced upon the people, forced into the media space. Even in this conversation, we're forced to say conversion therapy, or so-called conversion therapy, or conversion therapy in inverted commas. That is a misterm. It's a campaigning term, and we're always forced to go in a defensive way because of the way in which that term has been foisted upon us, but is completely ill-defined. No one knows what they're talking about, not even the parliamentarians. And anyone here should be shocked at the level of debate. Shocked. I'm traumatized by the way that he was debating. I'm traumatized by the way in which a law gets shifted in that hyped up way with no facts, no proper case studies. That's what traumatizes me, that we should actually be putting people into trauma by these kinds of this kind of legislation potentially passing, because that's where we will be left. Mike, sorry, I've been pushing my points there, and you have such a lot to say.
No, I was just thinking, even reparative therapy is trademarked in the US. Reintegrative therapy, any of the significant modalities or modalities that have defended their right to exist will be well established. But conversion therapy, well, where is it being done? What we are really seeing in the language that is being used in that clip, I think, is a bringing together of what is currently happening in Australia right now, and more so what is happening in Canada right now. And we're kind of trying to push back the front, so to speak, in terms of prayer and how this impacts on people from their point of view in the religious community. So I think we are on very dangerous ground here, because we are not, we've moved away from the scientific data. This country has been at pains for the last, year and a half to say that we're going to work from the science. We're going to go from first principles. Well, I beg to say that is not what we're doing in sexual politics. We are approaching this entirely from an ideological point of view, and that's what was demonstrated in that speech.
So let's just take apart a few of his other claims here. What about the claim about leading people to suicide? To believe you're broken leads people to suicide. How would you respond to that one, Mike?
Well, clearly, research done by Robin. It'll come to me in a minute. But we have to distinguish between suicide in terms of completion and suicide in terms of the desire to commit suicide. In other words, suicidal ideation. And with the exception of transgender, research that the last time I checked was still on the Royal College of Psychiatrists website, in Robin Matthey. I'll get there eventually. Yeah. She showed that LGBT or LGB are not a greater population in terms of suicidal completion. What is higher is suicidal ideation, which begs the question of, what is making people want to commit suicide? And the answer that has always been given is that it is systemic homophobia within society. And you heard that very much in that speech, that this is what is causing suicide. But here's my problem. Who has done the studies in terms of people who want to commit suicide who can't get help? They cannot access help. They do not know where to go. What work has been done in terms of understanding the population in any of our countries who are unhappy with their homosexuality and who want to seek change? I don't think.
They say it's worse than that. It's because people are being stopped from doing these studies. So within institutions, what we have is a place whereby we're not able to ask these questions in order to get the answers. We're not able to. We know that we've been working with James Caspian, of course, who sought on with regard to the transgender issue to take to study that within an academic context. People are being pushed back from these studies. So getting data on this is also difficult, although I know there is some from the United States. So there's a pushback institutionally. And so a lot of these, and generally, and a lot of the debate, the political debate and the media debate, and what is deemed fairly high-level debate is actually done through emotion and through stories. And we've got, I mean, Mike has 100 stories. I mean, you come onto the X Out Loud platform, onto the International Federation for Therapeutic Choice and Counselling platform, to the Core Issues Trust platform, and you will find countless stories of lives that have been changed and transformed, many of them through the love of Jesus Christ. Many of them actually through therapy, through straight therapeutic counselling that they have chosen. There are but these stories, very often Mike tries to get these stories, asks if these stories come onto the mainstream media, and often he's pushed back on that, getting these stories out. We see a lot of suppression around that. And I can see there that Paul Huxley, our communications manager, is saying these stories are also on the Christian Concern platform. Of course they are. Why? Because there's also this point, you know, this conversion therapy term, this is a bit of a thing with me. It's an ideological term that's been foisted upon us in order to prevent us from to muddle the terms, to muddle the waters. But of course, as Christians, there's a situation which, let's get beyond sexuality and say that, and let's just get beyond it all. As Christians, we are all sinners in need of a saviour. We are all broken by our sin. Sexual sin, thought sin, all kinds of sin that we are broken with. And the message of the gospel is that we are converted through the love and sacrifice of Christ Jesus on the cross of Calvary. That's an incredibly powerful message. So terms again are stolen. We find a mix up in the terms. People are rendered fearful. Their labels become our labels, or the labels get distorted. Christians that are struggling in this area begin to call themselves gay Christians, or begin to take on a gay identity. So they and even this whole thing in life of having these gay these sorts of identities, when what we are is new creations in Christ Jesus. The sin is gone. Whatever, nothing binds me. There is nothing in my life that identifies me more than being bound to Christ Jesus. And yet everyone is allowing themselves to be labelled in some way, as if we're bound to a hard label when we're being made new each day through the transforming love of Christ Jesus.
Carys, he talks about those subjected to exclusion, stigma, prejudice, whatever. Who's doing the subjecting here? Take this one apart for us as well.
I think, again, there are lots of things that are being ignored. There are people who simply don't want to live as LGBT people who are perhaps who never have, and who seek out counselling or seek out a church or something. And there are those who've left it behind. So those people are voluntarily coming forward to various groups for help. So it's not true that they're being subjected. I suspect that when the language of subjected is being used, that what's really going on is that the campaigners and the politicians have minors, i.e. people under 18 in mind. And the reason I say that is that many countries, so Germany, for example, has a conversion therapy ban which affects people under 18. And if they can get at children, they can make it a child protection issue, and they can bring it possibly into guidelines for schools and how schools refer pupils to counselling. Or work with social services. So I think it's a much bigger, we're on the tip of an iceberg here that I think we can't really see very clearly. So as I say, this language of subjection is not so easy. It sounds meaningless with adults, because you can quite easily find out if an adult wanted to be in a counselling session or wanted to speak to their pastor, had chosen the church because they have a biblical stance.
We offer sexual attraction fluidity exploration in therapy. The acronym is SAFETY. We explore sexuality. The very thing, actually, that the lobbyists are beginning to promote. They're saying that that kind of therapy is right, that we should be able to explore with clients who are questioning things. Their issue is who does it. We can't do it, but they can do it. My argument is there's an ideology here, a conflict between two ideologies. We always have to have checks and balances. Or any psychotherapist worth his salt is going to be putting himself or herself in a position where they attempt to be neutral, at least in terms of being open about where they are coming from and allowing people to disagree. If somebody comes to me and they want help, and then it gets to a point where they find that what I'm offering is not what they want to do, well, I think that's fair enough. They should go and connect with a person who they feel can help him. We have to be aware of the approaches we are taking, and we have to help our clients to be able to critically engage with what we are doing, so that we're not indoctrinating people, that they can make choices, that they can go in the direction that is meaningful to them. But this thing that only we or we have to be discriminated against because we can't do that, only gay affirming people can do that, is the result of this viewpoint discrimination that I think is at the root of all of this. We all have ideologies. We all have different points of view. So, if we're going to work in a scientific model, we have to come to the feet of scientific method and look at what the scientific data says. And where adjustments are made, well, if we're honest, we make them wherever we are. But that is what is being stopped. And that's why I say this is a classic Marxian approach to things. It's about increasing conflict and highlighting trouble, so that we can push forward a certain political agenda. It's profoundly dishonest.
That's very well explained, Mike.
The point that Carys was making about the agenda being foisted then upon children in terms of where we end up there, we at the Christian Legal Centre, we have experience of, and I in fact was talking to a lady this morning, a mum in a school this morning, where the around the LGBT teaching in the classroom around relationships education, but she was threatened with social services for her viewpoint.
Yeah,
we've had parents reported to prevent for this. We've had social services turn up at the door of parents where 10-year-olds, that's the Casey, if you remember the story of Casey, we've got a video of that story, might even be one to watch. We could potentially even close out with that story.
Andrea, perhaps you'd like to comment on this comment from Cornerstone City on YouTube. So, will conversion therapy ban also cover teaching young children about LGBT issues who are too young to understand about sexuality?
Well, our children. I mean, the case that I was on this morning, the mum that I was talking with this morning, this had started, as early as years 1 and 2 in terms of relationships education, and she was now dealing with her son in year 5, and being asked to participate in the in colour parades, this kind of thing. He questioned it in the classroom, saying, saying that he couldn't do it. As a result of this, there was then some difficulty, a furore, and the mum was basically told, if you continue in this way, we will report you to social services. And so because of the viewpoint of the child comes.
You could argue this is a kind of sexualization therapy for young children, couldn't you? You could say that they're trying to sexualize these young children, and but the point about whatever conversion therapy ban means, somehow it's not going to ban that, is it?
Can I say that the word conversion therapy will also be changed at some point to conversion practices, which is what happened in Malta with its law.
Germany.
And that made it easier then for them to attack Christian sexual ethics in general. And there's a parallel here between gay affirmative therapy, which is a term that came from the US to this country in the 1990s, and then gay affirmative practices in social work. So yes, I'm not surprised that children or parents are wrongly being referred to social services.
And Carys, would you like to comment? Because he lumps in LGB and T and Q in this whole thing. And that doesn't work, does it, Carys? Tell us about that.
I mean, yeah, the motion, the text of the motion is quite extraordinary. As you've said already, it goes all over the place. And here's what it actually says, that it declares that it is fundamentally wrong to view our LGBTQ community as requiring a fix or cure, as if it's a single population. Of course, it's not. We know that. But it's extraordinary that this is happening in Northern Ireland, because all the while in the rest of the UK, especially in England and Wales, there's been this debate about the what's happening with transgender issues among young people, but even young adults over the age of 18. We've had the judicial review of the use of puberty blockers, the prescription of them in the Tavistock clinic, and that's currently being appealed. It's a big debate, and it's ongoing, and it's international in scope. You've got doctors on both sides internationally, activists, and what's Northern Ireland, the majority of politicians in Northern Ireland are proceeding as if this debate didn't exist. It's quite extraordinary, because in the rest of the UK, and even now more in the US and elsewhere, people who might actually support conversion therapy bans are now saying they don't want them because they would risk teenagers being pulled in to physical mutilation of the body, gender reassignment. And that's many of these teenagers may have same-sex attraction, certainly not all. And so suddenly they're seeing the danger of having a blanket ban like this, saying the word LGBTQ. That's the first thing. The second thing is the Q stands for, well, queer, but also questioning. Are you going to criminalize questioning? And again, in Malta especially, people were told, oh, no, we won't be criminalizing talk of sexual fluidity, which is another way of talking about questioning. Yes, and when you look at the current memorandum we have in this country, which is a professional ban, it says it doesn't ban that. So it's quite extraordinary just how far these politicians in Northern Ireland have gone compared to anywhere else. Yeah,
it is. So, Andrea, is there a middle ground here? Is there sort of some compromised position whereby we can say, as some people are saying, we support a ban on conversion therapy, but not in these circumstances, not in these situations? Where do you think we go on this?
Well, I think that there are many. There's a reality that Carys and Mike and myself, we've been in the middle of this for many, many years now. And I do find it kind of like a little bit saddening, sometimes unbelievable, that the church in a well-meaning way, and leaders within the church in a well-meaning way, say we want to ban certain conversion therapy practices, so-called conversion therapy practices. Of course, certain things should be banned. We are very welcoming. Well, no, Mike is the most welcoming person in the whole wide world to people who I come in saying they're homosexual or whatever. There's no one more welcoming in the whole wide world. So this idea always again that that we need to be more welcoming. You need to be more affirming. Well, come and be welcomed, because everyone is welcome. Always. The truth of Christ welcomes, but the truth of Christ also speaks into the lives of people powerfully, speaks about change and transformation, speaks about turning away from the things that God calls sin. And you know what? It's not just about, sometimes I'm so tired of talking about homosexuality, because actually it's all sexual impurity outside of one woman, one marriage. What a high standard. That's the standard that the Bible sets for us to seek in terms of purity. And what's happened in many Christian circles and many Christian statements in this, and even in recent days, is, of course, we want to ban anything, and there should be a ban on anything that is harmful. Well, what does that mean? How is the government? What's that going to permit the government to do? What does the church understand that to be? In the debate the other day, conversation around it was, one commentator said this: we hear about these therapies, but I'm very concerned about the way in which young men, gay young men, are being told that they have to be celibate. And the Christian practices are about encouraging men to be celibate in this situation. Now, that was actually said in a debate that I was on around this. So you can see these things shifting continually. This label that a lot of evangelical Christians are putting on themselves.
That was on BBC Radio, wasn't it, this week? And the clip is on our website. I'm sure my colleagues will post it.
And also evangelicals saying I'm labeling themselves with the term gay Christian, and saying certain forms of conversion therapy, without that being defined, should be banned. I mean, that is just, again, a total lack of understanding of where we've come, of this debate, and of where we go. I mean, I think, Mike, you've had many head-to-heads with, for instance, with Jane Ozanne, who's been an effective campaigner on the Church of England Synod and in the public space on this.
She refuses to debate me now.
Correct.
So that doesn't happen anymore. Sadly, I would like to have more conversations with Jane, but she doesn't like to do that in public, sadly.
But she has said, to be clear, so because people might not know, she has said she wants to criminalize even praying for people who want to move away from same-sex attraction and preaching and all of that kind of stuff.
You know, this question you've raised, Tim, about compromising on conversion therapy, this is what I would like to suggest. Number one, we should all be against bad practice. It doesn't matter who we are. But if some groups are kept from the negotiation table, I remember when we asked, could we please be a part of the meeting that discussed the Memorandum of Understanding? And Norman Lamb, the Secretary of State at the time, or the minister at the time, refused to allow us. And we found out that it was because the UKCP said that we couldn't be there. You know, if you want to create a common denominator, if you want to move together, then you sit down. We do that throughout the world in all sorts of political contexts, but we will not do it here because we don't want to resolve this. We want to carry on as we are. I pulled out the document that I received when my appeal in the APA was rejected. I was in a professional mental health context completing studies, and they refused to allow me to continue because I fell out with them over this issue. But I notice in this document that they invite me to come back and do the training again when I consistently cease to promulgate my current opinions, and that I'm clearly able to demonstrate that I would undertake only to advocate the work that falls and complies within the UKCP. So, in other words, I am kept out.
What year was that?
2013.
Exactly.
My point is that if I change my mind, you see, there's nothing against my practice. I didn't do anything wrong. But my ideas don't align with the Memorandum of Understanding, number one. It doesn't support the guidelines. I can't support the guidelines advocated by the UKCP. So I feel that this is classic viewpoint discrimination. You can only hold one point of view if you want to develop as a mental health practitioner in this country. And that is the fruit and the result of this Memorandum of Understanding. They are judge, jury, and executioner. And if you don't hold the same point of view, you may not participate. And that's what we're dealing with.
And the Association of Christian Counsellors, have signed up to that memorandum. And people know that they can't have a practicing certificate unless they're signed up. And what then happens to the Christians? Well, they tend to go silent. What then happens to those that should be supporting these Christians and supporting Mike Davidson? They go silent. They actually say there should be some kind of ban.
And you know what, Andrea, the Association of Christian Counsellors is out of whack with the American Association of Christian Counsellors, with the Australian Association of Christian Counsellors. They have gone in a liberal, progressive direction. And
but
I'm
also
afraid they have
faculties. I'm sorry to talk over you there, but again, some of our theological faculties, we're seeing evangelical colleges in their counselling courses talking about subscribing to the Memorandum of Understanding. And because they know that the only way to get their people through is for them to change or to accede to this viewpoint. And that's why the work of the International Federation for Therapeutic Choice and Counselling is so important, because it's going to create a global movement of peer-reviewed therapy.
I just want to cover off a couple more things before, in the time we've got left. Doug Beattie, he claimed that he didn't actually name your ministry, but he's clearly talking about you, Mike Davidson, isn't he? Where he talks about a charity that is funded by the IFTCC. I think he's got his facts wrong there, has he not?
Well, he's gotten back to front, but I can forgive him for that. But what I can't forgive him for is this belief that people are imposing anything. Who is doing this gay cure stuff? Who is telling people that they are abominations? Where is that happening? If we need pastoral care guidelines, or if we need specific guidelines worked out in terms of deliverance, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we need any kind of guidelines that groups of people can be signed up to, we should be developing it. Because we should be the first to say that that is inhumane and that you cannot say that. But, Core Issues Trust is not curing anybody. It is not imposing anything.
What would you say, Mike, to Hayley Louise Hayward, is it, on Facebook, who says, is there any evidence that therapy works in cases of homosexuality?
Well, it worked enough for me, Hayley. I don't know what the test is, but I was very conflicted. And there was a day when I had to make a decision. And if it was, my wife would say, she knew the point at which I had to go in a new direction if our marriage was to continue and to be viable. And I spent 3 years interacting with a range of people, and they didn't, were they successful? Well, here, what's the definition of success? If I'm depressed and I go to a GP and I get some medication and I get some talk therapy and I work out my depression, then and I get back to work and I can pay my taxes and I can fix my car and I can mow the grass, I would say that's pretty good. Does that mean I never ever have any, any thought of depression in my life. I don't think that's how it is. In my case, I went through the 3 years, and over a period of time, behaviors began to shift, ways of thinking, memories that would come into my life, patterns in terms of how I related to people began to change. And as that began to change, so the feelings dissipated. So did it work? It worked well enough for me to still be married to the same woman and to feel authentic and genuine in my love, and not to have any conflict in terms of my emotional template in relation to any other man. That's good enough. And that's what those people gave me. Now, why can we not, under, appropriate conditions, still provide the service that I was given?
I noticed, Mike, somebody else has commented on YouTube, of course there's enough evidence. I'm one of those evidence, and a lot of other people like me. And thank you for that. And you can go to X Out Loud. You can go to Changed Movement, isn't it? .org. There are various other groups that are with lots and lots of stories like this, and we need to hear these stories. Carys, I think you're itching to talk more about this issue of compromise, aren't you?
I think that is the main overarching question of all that we've been saying. And I think I would say, no, don't compromise, because what the mistake has been made in some places like Australia, and that people are making in Canada, is to compromise with the term conversion therapy. There's absolutely no need. It's an invented term. It's a deceitful term, like we've said, coming right the way from the UN. And so that's different. Not compromising on that is different than what Mike's saying, which is we should all be against bad therapy. That's obvious. And the question of whether you should use statute law or other policies or regulation, those are the real issues with regard to counselling and therapy. And they're difficult. And they actually, when you look closely, the counselling and therapy professions are divided over them generally. And so there's a lot, again, that's not being talked about here. So, but the take-home message is, do not compromise, because the term conversion therapy is just a lie and a deceit. And churches will never, if churches compromise on that, and Christians compromise on that, they will be building their house on the sand, and they shouldn't do that.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we've run out of time. I can see there's more comments and interest in this subject. I know maybe my colleagues will put up the interview we did with Mike Davidson just a few weeks ago, where we explored this issue in more depth. It's very useful, over 1,000 views already for that. But thank you, Mike, so much for your ministry and your wisdom on this subject, and Carys and Andrea as well. And thank you all for watching and engaging, and look forward to engaging further with you on another subject next week. And do follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and connect up to our emails, and look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.